Well, we have a rare EP spotting in the studio.
Yes, we do.
Ladies and gentlemen, introducing our executive producer, the woman that has been behind the scenes, making all the clips, making all the posts, hashing all the tags. This is Anna, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me to the podcast.
Welcome to the studio.
It's beautiful in here. I've
What do
only
you
ever
think?
seen it from behind the screen. It's great to be in front of the camera today.
Here you are joining me. As you know, I have been so excited for this. I've been looking forward to your and I's episodes for quite some time. This was something we've been plotting for honestly over a year now.
It feels like it.
Yeah, we knew it was coming. It was just a matter of when it was going to happen. So thank you for coming into town.
Thank you for inviting me.
And we're going to dig in today. It's going to be a good time.
We have a lot of good things on the schedule today. I'm very excited.
And we were like last minute trying to figure out which things to talk about because there is a lot to cover.
We have too much to talk about, which is a great problem to have. That also means a lot of things are happening in the media. You guys have a lot of questions for us. So it's going to be a good episode.
Yes. So hopefully we picked the right topics to dig into. So let's give everyone a little background about you. So for longtime listeners and even first-time followers, Anna has been the executive producer of this podcast for, is this year 3, season 3?
Yeah, I think so.
So Anna was an intern, one of our social media interns at Pitt. She is also a dietitian. And so that is what's fun is her marketing expertise and executive producer and media expertise is in conjunction with her being a dietitian as well. So today she's going to be running our podcast as the sort of manager of it, so to speak. But what's cool is as she talks me through and walks me through and cues me up for topics we're going to dig into, she'll also be able to chime in and give some little dietitianisms and all that fun stuff. So
it is crazy to see what this podcast has become because I was EPing back when this was filmed on an iPhone in the office with our tiny mic and we've had to pass it back and forth to now be in this beautiful studio. It's amazing. So
yeah,
happy
we've come
to be
a
here.
long way. And like you said, quality of content. I mean, you are the reason that we've been able to stack that, right? You've been giving us really good behind the scenes intel. For everyone listening, like the episode evolution over the years, she's been a big player in that. Like, hey, this is what people seem to be most interested in. This is what's getting the most watches. And so it's been really cool to grow this with you.
It's been really fun.
She did run away from us after she graduated from Pitt. She moved to Philadelphia, the other city in Pennsylvania.
Go Birds.
Yeah, wow, that's rough. I instant regrets. But anyway, it is to say that she's on the other side of the state, and so we've been doing all our work remotely. And so to coax her back to the west side of the state was no easy matter, but we got her here. So let's kick this thing off.
Let's
excited.
do it. I feel like we're opening today with a really hot topic. It's been something that has been in the media a lot. Probably you at home have seen it. And Andrew, my question for you today, should I stop consuming protein powder because it has lead in it?
Yes. I'm so happy. Well, no, you shouldn't. But also, yes, I'm very excited we're talking about this topic. This one has blown up. So it was, I think, 2 weeks ago now. Consumer Reports released a report on a variety of mostly plant-based protein powders, a couple whey protein powders and other dairy-based ones as well, but it was mostly plant-based. And they made some really, really exclamatory and bold claims from information that did not warrant it. And so what's happened is I personally have had at least a dozen people DM me like, should I stop taking my protein powder? The dietitian team, we've been getting flooded with this across our offices. So we had to address this in one of our team meetings like last week was like, hey, no, here's the data. This is where we're at. And so that's what's fun is as a team, we're always staying on the cutting edge, which is part of what we do for people, help them navigate the confusing world that is nutrition. But the short answer is no. Keep calm, protein on, you're good to go. Some of the details that I'd want people to know about this. First is that lead is a biologic problem as much as it's an environmental problem. So when you hear lead in food, there's this immediate response that's like, oh, that must be from, the machinery, or this must be something that was added to it. Like this is a mark of inferior quality. Lead is one of many minerals and elements that are in soil. And anything that grows has some amount of lead. The question is not presence or absence, it's dosage. And in this case, we have two criteria. We have sort of what we'll call our USDA and FDA guidelines of like what is safe and tolerable, like a tolerable upper limit to prevent toxicity. And then we have one thing that gets nudged and referenced often, which is the Prop 65 recommendation. Prop 65 is out of California. It came out about 15 years ago at this point. And this was California in the early days of some of its like really progressive food regulation and ruling. And Prop 65 is really just if it exceeds Prop 65 in the state of California, there has to be a trigger it triggers a label requirement.
Yep.
And so this product has more lead than Prop 65 allows. The question then should be, well, what's the validity of the Prop 65?
Is that
level?
a recommendation we should be following? Is it?
And is it based in research, and is there rationale for it? And the short answer is like, it's not great. And so it's kind of an opinion, and it was really politically bastardized in a lot of ways. And so it's really hard to take Prop 65 seriously and do a lot with it. I don't put a lot of weight into it. The comment is with lead specifically, the generally recognized like safe tolerable upper limit is, I think, 12.5 micrograms. Prop 65 arbitrarily sets it at 0.5 micrograms.
Yep.
So like 1/25 of the dosage.
Far below.
And these are both parts per million measures and parts per billion. So these are microscopic. And just like people freak out when they see the video, have you seen the video of the magnet in baby formula and the iron comes out?
Yep.
And it's, yes, when you consume iron, it is a teeny metal. And so no, that metal in the baby formula is not shards of metal from the factory. That is literally what iron looks like at a non-microscopic level once it's pulled. Lead is the same thing. These things in trace amounts are not the problem. And so trace mineral or trace element is not a problem. It's the dosage. And so what's worth noting, this consumer report, most of the products that were reported were still under the Prop 65, which is wild to say. So we're not even saying that these all exceeded Prop 65. We're saying that some of them were close to it, and they got called out for being close to a measure that's 1/25 of what we know to be safe.
It's making major headlines, and it hasn't even exceeded Prop 65.
For no reason. Here's even worse. Here's a fun thing to think about. 0.5 micrograms. A sweet potato has 1 microgram. A cup of spinach has 1 microgram. A half cup of oats has roughly 1 microgram.
And these are all foods that everyone thinks are incredibly healthy.
They're just food, right? And
Yeah,
it's because
it's
they're plants.
food.
And plants come from the ground, and ground soil has all sorts of minerals in it. And so most of these protein powders that are now getting basically chastised and categorized as bad had less in them than a serving of a fruit or a vegetable or a grain. And so that's why I say short answer is keep calm, keep doing your thing. There are going to be trace amounts of these things. Lead is not poisonous at any dosage. It is poisonous at high dosages. We have very good data that shows what those dosages are. For lead, it's nothing over 12.5 micrograms per day consistently over time. You're talking about products that are between 0.1 and 0.5 for the most part, which is way down there. And so keep using your protein powders if that's something that's a part of your day. I wouldn't want to see you lose access to that, especially if it's something that's a part of your overarching routine and rhythm and keeps you in a good place and helps drive your satiety or helps your muscle recovery or why else you're using it. And this is an example of the media. It must have been a slow media day. Like that's what happens is they look for a headline and unfortunately, fear sells better than happiness.
Absolutely. This has become a huge fear-mongering thing, whether it be the media, the news, and also once nutrition influencers get wind of this, and maybe people who don't have a nutrition scientific background, they might take a headline and run with it and not understand all the things that you and I just dove into and the dosing of it. Who is going to take the time to look at a TikTok that they saw and then go do a bunch of research on the adequate dosage and what the dosage of their protein powder is versus the dosage of a sweet potato?
It's me. It's what we do.
And then
it's
that is
we.
you. And of course, that's where the dietitian comes in.
Yep, that's where we come in. But that is, to your point, that's what happens is it's a headline that then gets just passed across all sorts of tiers. And it's a bunch of people that think they know enough just to be dangerous. And also a bunch of people that frankly are just in it for the clicks and swipes, which is one of my least favorite things. It's like if the entire reason why you're doing something is for attention, you've lost the plot. Like period, just end of story, lost the plot. That is one of the most sickening things. I digress so we don't fractal, but yeah, it's to say this consumer report was largely an invalid and irrelevant thing. I would ignore it. And any of the people that are out there that are chastising this or blowing this up and blowing it out of proportion likely don't really understand science, which is unfortunate, but it is reality. And I guess my last comment would just be keeping in mind that where you get your information matters. And so don't forget that there are people out there that actually want to dig into the research and want to help you navigate and have your best interest in mind. And if someone is about to rebut like, well, people should be eating whole foods instead, it's like, sure, but a protein shake or a protein powder can be a tool in a toolbox. Absolutely. And there's millions of people that have millions of lives, and there's different ways to puzzle piece stuff together. And so I'm not going to chastise one ingredient for all people. So just, understand the game you're playing.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the same vein of media and social media posting, you made a post recently that I really enjoyed, and I think we should dive into a little bit more.
Okay.
And so the prompt that you were using and the question I'm going to ask you today is, what is the single most important habit that you would recommend as a dietitian?
Yes, you're right. I did do this one a couple of weeks ago. This has been speaking to me recently. It's something I've recommended for a really long time. So it's not like it's this novel concept. But I think the more time I spend as not a dietitian, which is funny to say, so it's probably not a surprise to anybody listening, but as our company has grown, like I'm not really counseling near as much as I used to. And as you know, I used to counsel absurd amounts.
An absurd amount of hours.
Gross amount of time. I used to counsel 70 to 75 hours a week in session in front of people.
And on top of that, doing other CEO things, running a business.
Yeah. That was the 100-hour weeks of my 20s.
The work-life balance was at an all-time low.
Yeah, it was work-life balance was what we used to call it back then. Yep. But anyway, so I used to see 100 some people a week. Now I've got a small little caseload of clientele. And what's interesting is as I am doing more business stuff and I'm engaging the team more and I'm mentoring more and I'm doing in-services more, what it's forcing me to do is distill my most effective teachings that created the biggest ahas, because obviously this company is now a reputation of being like amazing dietitians, best of the best in class. We're a team of amazing RDs. But the original reputation was I was a really good dietitian back in my day, right? And so with that, what's fun is as I'm doing more mentoring and less counseling, it's forcing me to reflect back and be like, okay, the case specific is going to be 12 in January.
Oh my goodness.
And so over the past 12 years, I've personally met with over 15,000 patients one-on-one, and I've helped people through a whole host of life realities. And so when I'm looking back and going, what were the ahas? What were the things that got people? And what are the mic drops? What are those heavy hits? What are those precise moments? Nightly projections comes up as the thing.
What is a nightly projection?
Yeah. And what I'll preface, I'll say, I'm so long about this that if I could just have every human start doing this, I think that we would be floored at how much our health would thrive. Not just our nutritional consistency, but our health would thrive. So a nightly projection is the simple act of writing tomorrow in pencil. If I'm going to oversimplify it, I challenge my clients, and the harder part of this is literally just doing it consistently, because it's fundamentally literally the easiest thing you could do. It takes less than 3 minutes, but you have to be willing to care about yourself for 3 minutes. And that's one of the reasons why I think this is so effective is it's rare that I am going to be so hard on something that it's like, if you don't do this, you don't care. Right? Because it's like, hey, life happens. I don't expect people to bat 1,000 almost ever, right? Like there's going to be nuance. Life is complicated. It's all about consistency and rebound. Like let's navigate the hills. This is one of those things where I will have the audacity to say to the right audience member, like, if you're not willing to do this every day, we need to actually discuss why you fundamentally don't care enough about yourself.
I mean, you said 3 minutes. 3 minutes is not a lot of time, and it sounds really simple. And it's for you and for yourself. And I think that's where people get stuck. Like taking an intentional time out of your day to do this consistently is the problem. You can do it for one night, but if you're only going to do it for a few days, is it really going to make that impact?
It's not going to compound. So let's visualize what this is. So I said it, a simplified, zoomed out, it is writing tomorrow in pencil. But what I mean by that is it's taking tonight, end of the day, and looking at tomorrow and going, what's my schedule? Where am I going to be? Where am I running the kids? What do I have for work? Like, what's my life looking like tomorrow? Very much knowing that a lot of it may be a giant question mark, but some of it's going to be there. Your heavy hitters are going to be scheduled. And then it is based on that chaos, when am I eating? And then based on the when, where am I going to be? And then based on the where, what am I going to eat?
Yep.
And if you do that when, where, what situation, holy crap, all of a sudden, instead of while the kids are screaming about something and you're juggling something else and the dog's scratching at the door and you're trying to figure out what's for breakfast, your brain is going to go, nothing. It's just going to skip it because it's one decision across too many other things. Yep. And then lunch happens. And right before you're about to go to lunch, you get called into a meeting and then you're stuck with the, eating either nothing or grabbing whatever's close. And it's rare that whatever's close is actually in your best interest. And then you get home and you're exhausted from a day and you get to ask the question, what's for dinner? And nothing is near enough. Oh, I have to thaw that. Oh, I have to, or even I can't think about that. It's so common to just, when you're in a busy day, if you react to your food, you're going to end up with subpar options. So what ends up happening is if instead we look at it and say, okay, tomorrow I got to get out the door early. I'm going to eat my breakfast in the car.
Yep. And that's a totally acceptable answer. It doesn't have to be that you're going to sit down 30 minutes before you have to leave and eat this beautiful breakfast yogurt bowl with your granola in one section and your berries cut up in one section. We're not saying it has to be complicated. We're saying think about it. Even if that breakfast is in the car, just think about it ahead of time.
Yes, exactly. And that's what's kind of nice about this. You start to hear is a lot of times people have this like A or F mindset around food. It's if I can't do the perfect thing, which is like you said, make this beautiful granola spread with berries and Greek yogurt and a drizzle of lavender honey sourced from local bees, then I should just not care and I might as well eat a McGriddle.
It's the all or nothing mindset.
It's all or nothing. And so what this does is when you start to aim, you're aiming up, which means you're aiming towards something that's better than your reaction. But anytime we have time to plan, it does two things. One, it improves the choice that's made because you have your long-term goals in mind versus in the moment, your urgency, only your short-term goals are in mind. So it's huge for that, right? And in addition to that, it also sets us up so that we can then think about the better options. But more importantly, it sets us up so that the decision fatigue doesn't happen, which is to say in the moment when you're reacting, you're going to make a decision that's on top of all the other decisions of the day, which is super stressful. And that's what people don't realize is deciding what's for breakfast when it's breakfast time is urgent and also on top of your other decisions for the day. Deciding what's for lunch at lunchtime, deciding what's for dinner at dinner time. Most of the time, we are fairly consistently not going to have the bandwidth to actually step out of our chaos and make that decision. And so for most people, deciding that ahead of time is a stress reducer. So what ends up happening is it's okay, I'm going to be in the car tomorrow for breakfast. So tomorrow morning, I'm going to make that smoothie that I like when I'm on the go. And then lunch, I'm going to be dropping off this and picking up this. I'll be driving through this area of town. And you know what? There's a Chipotle there. I'll pick up a Chipotle salad on the way. And then tomorrow night dinner, we've got the kids doing this and this and this. We're probably going to be running. You know what? I'm going to take the soup out of the chili out of the freezer right now and thaw it. We'll grab chili. Or, hey, we're going to pick up from so-and-so's and we're going to grab this food. Whatever it is, you can already hear where the next day when you're living that in real time, when it's, oh, I got to make my smoothie, that is way less stressful than what's for breakfast. When it's, ooh, let me stop at that Chipotle, that's way less stressful than what's for lunch. And then, ooh, what's for dinner? So you're saving yourself 3 stressful decisions in stressful circumstances. You're also anchoring yourself to something that gives you a reference or a creative constraint, even if it doesn't go well.
Yeah.
One of my favorite examples of this is, say you get to lunch and your brain was like Chipotle salad and you get to the Chipotle and it's closed for a team in service. Your brain, because it thought Chipotle salad, is going to go, where else can I grab a salad? Boom. That is so big. If you had only said, oh, I'll go to Chipotle, That's not specific enough. It's like, what are you getting? Because all you're doing is you're anchoring a workflow that makes the decision clear. And so your brain in that stressful moment will defer to the most detailed version of it. And so it'll say, where can I grab a salad?
Instead of going, what's for lunch? Oh, let me think. Chipotle. What am I going to get at Chipotle? A salad. You've already made all the decisions the day before, so that when you're in the moment, you're prepared to make a better choice for yourself. You're reducing the decision fatigue, all of it.
When I was in my master's, I got to do research with a behavioral economics division of Disney.
What didn't you do during your master's?
I was a busy guy. Yeah, I got to do some cool stuff.
What's changed?
Very fortunate. And so, but what was neat was so behavioral economics is the study of people and study of humans. And I got to work with, to this date, some of the most brilliant minds I've ever associated with. And I stay in touch with quite a few of them for that reason, because man, if you ever need to feel dumb, hang out with these people. It's great. One of my favorite things. So anywho, one of the things we did is we actually did some studies that was looking at short-term and long-term thinking and gratification. And the story short, one of the studies we did showed that in the moment, humans really struggle to prioritize their long-term goals. So short-term urgency, the urgency illusion, overrides. And the reasoning is because your limbic brain, which is right here at the lower part of your brainstem, that is what we like to call our monkey brain, right? That's the part that's the most animalistic part of us. It is just our raw emotions. It's our fight or flight. When it's engaged, it gets priority over the nervous system, over our prefrontal cortex on the front of our head. So our consciousness gets impeded by our emotional reactivity. And so the short term, oh my God, I got to do this, got to do this, got to do this. That's an adrenaline-based limbic process. Your conscious brain being able to pull you out of that and say, slow down, let's take a step back, let's think about this in the middle of a day, in the middle of a moment, especially if you're being pulled multiple directions, is virtually non-existent. And so the comment is, you don't need to have this delusion of willpower in that moment. What you needed was the willpower to think ahead the night before or the morning before. I usually say night before, because morning before, that's a really good way to step into your morning with an alarm that beeped, or a kid that needed what, or a dog that needed. It's the chaos may interrupt that. And so right before bed, 3 minutes, what's my tomorrow look like? Write it in pencil, anchor your food, set yourself up to make the right decision. And what ends up happening is, again, you said it perfectly earlier, do this one day, it'll save you some stress. Do this for a month. You will be floored at how much better you navigate work lunches and social environments and fun meals and exceptions, because then you start to realize a lot of the things you plan to do that are like the big eating occasions, you really enjoy doing them, and you know they're coming, which means you keep them in mind, which means you prioritize them better. So this doesn't mean you're avoiding your favorite things. It means you're better prioritizing, like, oh, tomorrow night I finally get that guy's night and I'm doing pizza and wings. Like, I'm going to have myself a good time. I'm going to make adjustments to my breakfast and lunch accordingly.
You actually brought up exactly where I was going to go with this topic, which is, this is incredibly helpful for those who like work a 9 to 5, who maybe have a standard week. It's also incredibly helpful for those social situations where people can tend to feel out of control with their goals, where they're going out on a Friday night for happy hour margaritas with their friends and they're really excited about it. And maybe it could be a more indulgent meal for you than something you typically eat on Wednesday for lunch, let's say. And so if you do this exercise the day before you're going out with your friends and you say, I know I'm going to this Mexican restaurant, I'm going to have one margarita, and you think about it ahead of time, maybe you're not having a fourth margarita, but sometimes it really just helps you level set. And this plays into, of course, all foods in moderation. Like, we want you to go and have those fun social outings, but also that can be an instance where you're thinking about your short-term gratification and not your long-term goals. So
beautifully said. Basically nightly projections, planning ahead reduces volatility.
Yep.
And volatility can be what we'll call the negative side of that, which is the chaos of it all, or the positive side, which is the exception behavior, the special occasion behavior. And you start to see where I've watched this with, literally thousands of people over the years, because I do this with most people. You get to a point where having some sort of nightly projection to help yourself just like map your reality. And it's so cool to watch where they immediately start to see where they would be skipping meals, missing meals, settling for stuff. And then again, how often is it the thing where it's like they ate pizza and a cookie for lunch and they didn't even want the pizza and the cookie?
It was just what was there or what was easy at the time.
And they felt like crap, and then they felt sleepy and sluggish. And it's like, man, I would have much rather you gone out and gone to a brick oven pizza spot with your wife this weekend and enjoyed the pizza and a cool dessert than settle for it in between two meetings while you're exhausted and basically dopamine spent. And so it's so cool to watch where it takes away all the unnecessary stuff. It de-stresses people. It makes food more enjoyable. It improves decision making. It has such a compounding effect. And what I'll say is it ends up spilling over to exercise. It ends up spilling over to other aspects of self-care. When you start doing this, you start to be more consistent with your activity, because then it's oh yeah, between this and this tomorrow, I'm going to be running to the gym. And then because you're thinking about what you're eating related to when you're moving. And so that starts to get pulled into this whole thing. So now your exercise becomes more consistent. And then you start seeing family events, friend events. And so you stop being late to these things. Like, it's a time management hack that has such an immediate benefit to your food and your food consistency, but then starts to improve your sleep and your exercise and your hydration, all the other things. And again, instead of you having to have this giant checklist walking around like hydration status, food status, exercise status, happiness status. It's like, dude, write it in pencil the night before and then do your best to make a day that's worthy of writing in pen.
And it works no matter what your goal is. Your goal doesn't have to be the same as the other person's, but if you're both doing projections and you have your long-term goals in mind, it'll work for you.
Yeah. Nightly projections. It is the life hack that almost everybody needs. And the key, it's not hard to do. It's hard to do consistently, but that's not an excuse, right? It takes some time to make it a habit, but if you commit to 30 days of nightly projections, and I would say you can't just do it in your mind, you need to write it down or jot it down. So iNote on your phone, if you have some sort of app you want to do it through, that works fine too. Journal, if you're a journal person, that can be huge. One of my favorite things is it's really fun to have people that like to food journal, get one of those food journals. And so instead of writing the food down as you go, you write the food down that you're planning to eat the night before, and then you just have to write what was different. And if you ever want to catch random extras, going back to, you mentioned like the margarita thing, you write down, it's like, oh, tomorrow night I'm going to have some chips and salsa, and I'm going to have some fajitas, and I'm going to have a marg. And then going back in and writing 4 margs.
and that's okay. And that is part of life, and that happens. But going into it with that goal, maybe instead of maybe you planned for 1, and instead of having 4 or 5, you had 2.
Correct. And that's what I was going to say is this isn't meant to be a judgment call.
No.
What it does is, 1, it forces you to own the decision, which that's my big thing is, if you're going to do it, own it and make sure it's worth it. That is my entire feeling about that equation.
The nightly projections is about intentionality. It's about what was your intention going into the day, and did you live up to your own expectation of yourself? And if not, maybe we need to adjust our routine. Maybe we need to figure out why it's so difficult for us to achieve what our intention was. And we can troubleshoot from there. And that's where a dietitian can be so incredibly helpful. We are going to help you troubleshoot your life and your individual circumstances, whether you are a parent, whether you are single and live alone, no matter what your work status is. Everyone's day is going to look different. And so if we can figure out your intention and maybe why we aren't meeting it, finding out that middle ground is going to help you get closer to your goals.
Beautifully said. It's expectation versus reality. And when you see those, you get to then troubleshoot what's the gap and why. I had a client the other day. I'll give you an antithetical example of this, because a lot of people are going to think about the opposite, which is like the overdoing it. But someone sent me their nightly projection. And I went, looks like a good way to go hungry.
Oh, tell me more.
Yeah, right. So this is an example of someone who's trying to shift their body, right? They have some weight to lose that's impeding a whole lot of things about their physical abilities. And so in their mind, when they're projecting with weight loss in mind.
Yes.
And as a result, they're like leaning too hard into that. And here's the comment, is that is causing them to not lose because they have expectations that are not based in reality. And so they're aiming too restrictive, and that level of restriction is actually their issue. And so this is a cool example where you start to see the expectation versus reality reveals the problem. And so what happens for this individual case, you have a expectation that's overly rigid and too restrictive. And then you have a reality that ends up almost looking like a binge behavior. And then they go, I just need to have the willpower. And it's, No, you need to have a better starting point. Your aim is what's setting you up. Your restriction is creating your binge in this psychological experiment. The point of a projection is to write out a day in pencil that would be a day well lived, not a day spent hungry.
And if you did this for a week, we wouldn't expect you to meet your projection 100%.
No. The whole point of it is actually to help you see the variability that is life. This isn't meant to judge it. It's not meant to shame it. It's not meant to force or coerce 100% behavior. It's meant to get you closer. I actually said to a client yesterday that we were talking about this, I went, you do realize that the ring around the bullseye is still worth more points, right? And that's what this is. You're not going to hit the bullseye every time.
That's a great metaphor.
But if you're aiming for the bullseye and you hit the green ring, you still get 35 points. And that's way better than what we're doing right now for whatever the goal is, whether we're trying to feed an athlete up to help them build muscle, whether we're trying to tighten and lean out somebody, like whatever we're trying to do, or just prioritize self-care, set boundaries for self. It doesn't have to be objective. It could also be subjective. I don't care what we're doing with the human. We're encouraging them to refine their aim and say, we're doing this because you're worth it.
Well, tell me about your client story for this week. I know this is a good one.
Yeah, no, this is a really fun one. So we're going to talk about processed foods.
Dun, dun, dun.
And this was just such a perfect example of why this topic is so confusing to people and why people are doing some crazy stuff in its name, right? The concept of like, I don't eat processed foods anymore. It's getting pretty wild to watch, like what that means, where people are drawing the line. And so what I'll pitch is that I actually have a patient, and this client has ARFID, so associated food restrictive intake disorder, which is to say dealt with some really severe digestive problems.
Okay.
And those digestive problems were real. And while that was happening, there were foods that were making that way worse.
Yep.
And now, fast forward, digestive tract is in a good place. It's churning, it's running, and we're slowly but surely adding food back, adding variety back, balancing the diet, all those good things. And so as we're adding foods back, there is a understandable reluctance, resistance, and at times fear of the foods because it's, well, that food made this happen to me in the past. What if it happens again?
Yep.
It's like, and we're basically holding space and creating the environment for that to happen in a safe manner, build confidence back, get back to a good diet. But what's interesting is side quest engaged. Our last visit, we were talking through some foods that were being tried. And a food that there was resistance about wasn't actually about the ARFID. So brought up these chips.
Okay.
And the chips were bought because they were 2 ingredients, potato and olive oil.
Yep.
They were a really simple chip. And we bought them, didn't eat them, bought them, didn't eat them. And so we started digging into, why aren't we eating it? What's the reluctance? And I said out loud, the goal of us adding foods back is to add foods you're excited about. Yeah. So like, I don't feel compelled to force you to eat a chip just to eat a chip. Like, that's not what this is about.
If that doesn't excite you, then maybe we're in the wrong spot.
We may be barking up the wrong tree. I said, but my gut instinct tells me that you're resisting this for a reason that may not be related to what we're doing. And so I said, what is your brain telling you when you go to eat that chip?
Yep.
What is its threat? Because I don't think it's your gastric symptoms. And she goes, I think it's because it's processed. Right? And
processed food.
And I went, processed? Say more. And she was like, well, it's a snack food.
Okay.
I said, yes. And then I went, what we are hearing is the line of processing may not be well understood. And so her and I then dug into this, and we can obviously dig further from here. But level of processing is a very relevant conversation.
Yes. And to me, my favorite definition of a processed food is a processed food is any food that has been altered from its original form.
Yeah. 1,000-foot view.
That is a very broad definition, but something I say a lot is that the line of processing matters. And once you cut into an apple, you have processed that food. Yeah. Its original form from the tree is a whole apple with the core in the middle. And once you cut it, it is no longer how you removed it from that tree. Yeah. So it is processed. But do people hold that processing the same way we do a chip with potato and oil? No. So tell me more about this line of processing and how different people are taking it in different ways and where people are drawing that line.
It's perfectly said. And this is the reason I think this is so important is because right now the word processed is definitely a buzzword and people are trying to draw that line. And to be fair, like there is some merit in this discussion. So I'm not trying to, and that's where what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the spectrum of process. And I want people to better understand what it is so that they can draw the line from an informed place instead of a fear-mongered place. Because to your point, there is a big difference between eating the whole apple to drinking apple juice.
Those are totally different products.
Very, very different products that have a very different need and a very different utility. And there's also a lot in between. There's the apple that you eat with your hand. There's the apple you slice with a knife that you've processed by chopping it. There's the apples that they sliced them in a factory and then they sprayed them with, I think it's ethylene, glycol. Don't quote me on that. It's somewhere in that realm of chemical to preserve them and they put them in a baggie and then you eat those. And then there's the apple sauce that has been just literally smashed apples, but it retains all of the fiber. And then there's the ones where they remove the skin. And then there's the ones where they blend it and puree it so that it's a homogeneous uniform mixture. And then there's the one where they add sugar to it so that it stabilizes the flavor and it's an interfering agent, which means it creates a more homogenized product and is the same flavor year round because the sweetness of apples varies. And then there's the apple juice and then there's the apple juice with the added sugar. So like where are we drawing the line? Where are we drawing the line, Anna?
And that's different for everyone. And
that
I think
sounds overwhelming.
It is extremely overwhelming. And
start sobbing. I don't know.
I don't know what to do. And so what we're going to do today is talk through that same spectrum that you just talked through with apples, but with potatoes and with this client, because the chip was potato and oil. And so we can make that whole spectrum of foods, again, from potato from the ground all the way to Pringle, which we're going to discuss.
Exactly. So. And that's, I'm glad you said it, but it is fun to just anchor people with like the word processing means that entire spectrum. And so to say I'm not eating processed foods is a very confusing thing to say because 20 people will say it. And then upon inspection, they will have drawn the line of processing in 20 different places. So my hope is that we can create a little bit of understanding and awareness of that. And then also start to point out maybe where some of the like process levels that are worth like thinking through are, because that's really what goes missing. And so to your point, the potato is a fun one. And this is where that client and I got to talk was we have potato and then we can heat said potato because raw potato, not great.
No.
And now we have baked potato or we have air fried potato, or we have oven roasted or boiled potato. We then have the ability to slice said potato,
which is a form of processing that food. You're changing it from its initial form.
It's now sliced. And then once you slice it, you can do a lot with it, like fry it. And if you fry a sliced potato, that's what we call a potato chip. If you fry it super thin, it might be a crisp. If you fry it really thick, it might be a fry. I like love and hate this at the same time. I'm going to be honest. So without being too, too pandering, but anyway, for her and I's discussion, it was, what's a Pringle? How is the chip that you had, which is potato and oil and basically deep fried potato, crispy. That's it. That's all the whole thing versus Pringle, where a Pringle is the core ingredients, there's like 7 of them.
Yes, there are. And I have that list. And the list
Read that out. This is fun.
Dried potatoes, vegetable oil, degerminated yellow corn flour, cornstarch, rice flour, maltodextrin, and salt.
Cool. So 5 of those ingredients aren't potato or oil. And in fact, a Pringle is not a potato chip.
No.
It has rice and corn in it. So it is a starch crisp.
It's a starch crisp. That's a good way to put it.
And again, is this me taking my stand against food and saying never eat a Pringle again? No, but that is fundamentally different
than potato
and oil. Those things are going to be received very differently, largely. And this is where I think from a dietitian lens, the level of processing starts to break, in my opinion. And my opinion is rooted in a lot of, there's definitely a lot of like what I'll call like scientifically rigorous bias, but I won't call it fact. It is still my opinion. When you start to extract components of a food and combine them with components of other foods. So when you take the protein of a soybean and the oil from corn and the starch from a potato and then reassemble them that does not do the same thing as the original soybean that has carbs, fat, and protein, the original potato that has carbs, fat, and protein, and the original corn that has carbs, fat, and protein. Our body does not respond to that in the same way. That doesn't mean you shouldn't ever eat it. That doesn't mean we can't eat it. It doesn't mean it's poison. It doesn't mean it's toxic or any of the other buzzwords that are out there, but it is fundamentally different. That, though, is an extraction level of processing. That is not a lot of the foods that are currently getting scooped up. And so that would be where the term now that's becoming popular is UPFs, or ultra processed foods. And that's where when people casually talk about they're trying to reduce their processed foods, they start to do anything that is basically beyond just core ingredient. Like if it wasn't if it's not the identifiable food from ground, so the fruit or vegetable or meat in its most like similar, close to origin state, technically you've started a process, and a lot of people are starting to draw the line there, which can be very aggressive and also like wildly unnecessary, especially if it's coming from a place of fear. Like if the reason that you're skipping out on, I'll use fake numbers. Like if you're saying I will only eat 5% of foods, and we're saying that there's like 10% of foods that we should probably be like very cautious with, the other like 80 in the middle, why are you skipping and omitting those? If it's because of misplaced fear and just like not thorough understanding, that's kind of a damn shame.
It is.
And so I want to help people draw the line of processing by understanding like what we're actually talking about and what we're trying to play around with. And it's when foods get extracted and then recombined, that's where a lot of the fiber goes missing. That's where a lot of the protein goes missing. That's where the food breaks apart more easily, which means it's hyper digestible. That also hits the tongue differently, which means it's hyper palatable. It's not going to be digested the same way, which means it can have digestive downstream consequences. It can also not be very filling as a result, which means the capacity and tendency to overeat it can be high. So there is absolutely a tipping point where we would look at the level of processing, and I'll use the chip and the apple just for fun, is a cup of apple juice. It's like 4 apples. Good luck eating 4 apples. Those are just fundamentally not the same thing. And so we can get to a point where something is so processed that it actually really is just consumed fundamentally differently. Apple juice was one of the most important things that started to get standardized in the 1960s, because we still had caloric malnutrition back then. And there was a lot of vitamin and mineral issues. And so low income populations getting kids access to apple juice, bless you. That was a really, really important part. And now we're in a place where we don't necessarily have a calorie problem as much as we used to. We have a micronutrient problem and a fiber problem and a quality problem. So there's a conversation to be had about these things. But when it came to the chip in this instance, it was the idea of realizing that to call something that is potato and olive oil and put it in the same category as Pringle is to fundamentally misunderstand that food, misrepresent that food, and then also fear of consequences of that food that are likely not going to be real. And so that is where the amount of Pringles that you can eat, the original tagline was, once you pop, you just can't stop. Literally, like that was how
the original Pringles tagline, everyone.
Once you pop, you just can't stop. That was when I was in elementary school, I think, to date myself. But that's the whole point, is they are so hyper palatable and they're also not really filling. So you just cruise through them. Now, don't get me wrong. Can you eat a fair amount of straight up potato chips? Yes, but not nearly as many. You will actually register fullness. Quality of ingredient definitely matters. They're going to lead to different experiences. If we were going to look at satisfaction, if we were going to look at blood sugar, if we were going to look at fullness, there's a whole lot of differences between those. So we don't want to necessarily bundle a whole bunch of things under the label of processed and then run from 90% of foods. And so it was a really good conversation with this client. We ended up being able to look at like, hey, let's recategorize this. This doesn't go into low cost, super tasty snack. This goes into fun, crunchy side dish. And we're going to eat it next to a sandwich. and we're going to have some carrots and celery and tomatoes and hummus next to it. And it's going to be a really cool part of a meal. And it's
going to be part of a balanced meal with other components. Yep.
And a lot of times that would fit for a lot of processed foods too. And so goal here is not to say run away from anything or fearmonger anything. It's actually quite the opposite. It's to help recognize that a lot of people that are worried about this would benefit from better understanding what processed means, and then looking at foods and asking, what do I actually want to get from this? If the goal is to feel full, then like highly processed foods aren't going to accomplish that. If it's to enjoy something that tastes good, or to top off a meal, or to pair with a meal that's otherwise filling, it's going to enhance the taste, and we could end up with a delicious and nutritious kind of situation. Going back to sitting down and having the whole bag of chips and calling it dinner, the villain wasn't the chip.
Say more. Say more.
Yeah. So how you ate those chips, deciding that chips were your dinner, that was the thing that led to the overeating. And a lot of times people will eat a bag of chips for dinner on a Friday night because they're exhausted and can't think of anything else to eat and don't have the energy. And you start to realize, well, you're like, your mental burnout and your relationship with food in those moments was actually our core issue that we would want to work on. How you ate those chips was the struggle there. And so it's real easy to be like, yeah, I just can't keep them in the house. And it's like, well, that probably means that you're not eating them correctly. And that goes for a lot of the processed foods that receive criticism, is they're eaten in a way that allows them to be overconsumed because they're hyperpalatable, not filling. And then we blame the fact that they're hyperpalatable, not filling as the problem, when it's, well, no, like we would be able to eat these in a way that could be more manageable. But that assumes that the rest of your diet is the more fibrous, protein dense, slower digesting core foods.
You binge eat the entire bag on a Friday night and you say, I'm never going to eat these chips ever again. You don't eat them for 6 days, and then Friday night comes around again and you're in the same boat.
I could use some chips.
And instead you could have just had a handful of them with your lunch every day alongside your filling balanced meal with vegetables, and you'd feel better about yourself and you'd still enjoy the chips.
Beautifully said. So we can recognize that, yes, processing along a spectrum, whether you take it a potato or an apple or everything in between, all of those things will change the ingredient, and that change will lead to things becoming less filling, more palatable. It'll change it in various ways. That, I would like to say, across the entire spectrum, those are all puzzle pieces. And every day is a chance to put together a puzzle that is delicious and nutritious. And every single one of those pieces can be played, but they play well with other pieces. And so I would definitely utilize Pringles and juice differently than I would utilize apple and potato essentially. But it doesn't mean that they're not all potential pieces on the board.
And so how did this interaction with your client wrap up?
Yeah. So it was kind of a fun step back, where it was a recategorization, right? So one, we identified that there were basically levels of processing, and her fear was that certain levels of processing are going to be digested not quite the same, which is going to cause inflammation and irritation in the gut, which is not necessarily a false fear, right? There is potential. I can't rule that out completely, especially given this human's personal reality. But then from there, this one bled over not just into the ARFID fears of what's my gut going to do. This was also this food is unhealthy for me because it's processed. And that's where, again, that line gets blurry. And so we basically dug into what we just talked about, which is recognizing that there's a spectrum here, that understanding the line across the spectrum. And then we dug into the big question, which is like, so the intention of having this chip, other than exposure, where do you see this fitting into your day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month? And it was I'm not a huge chips person, so I don't find, and this isn't me speaking, this is the human speaking. I don't see this being something that I'm going to eat daily, but I could see it being a fun addition to a lunch when the family's out and about, and it could be a cool little snack.
Yeah.
It's okay. So what you're saying is you have a quality made processed food that is portioned well, integrated well, and implemented well. That sounds phenomenal.
It does.
So let's try that.
Yep.
And that's where we left it.
Perfect.
Fun.
Well. Okay, so I know that today we are screaming from the rooftops something that stemmed from a comedic client text thread that you want to read.
Yes. So, and you said it perfectly. This is something that I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast are going to feel very seen by. And I think it's going to lead very well into what we do as dietitians, which is the thing I've been called to continue to clarify. So background, this is not an actual personal client of mine. This is a person who knows me that wants to work with one of our dietitians and reached out and basically wanted to know, based on what they're working on, who they should work with.
Yep.
And I then said, honestly, team as a whole is very equipped to handle this, but here's some names at various locations based on what you're trying to do. And the response was, thank you so much. I am a difficult client because I know enough to be dangerous, but it's obviously not working for me. Do you recommend one of these practitioners for a strong personality? LOL.
And what did you say?
And I said, all of the above. Everyone thinks they know what to do, but they fail because they never take the time to troubleshoot how to do it. That's where we come in.
I know that we get this a lot where people feel like they know enough to be dangerous, but they're just not quite sure how to get there. Yes. So walk me through your thought process when you hear this, when someone says to you, I know what to do, I just can't do it.
Yeah, I know what to do, I just need to get it together. And we see this, people in their initial sessions, we see this as one of the most common reasons why people are like, should I reschedule my follow-up? I know what to do, I just really haven't gotten to do it yet. And so this shows up a lot. It's people, oftentimes, it's a reason not to work with a dietitian, is I don't need to see a dietitian, I know what to do. And it's, well, how's that going for you? Because dietitians aren't the what to do. Yes, we can give you a meal plan. Yes, we can tell you what to do. But the what to do is theoretically very easy, right? Eat more protein, eat more produce, pattern meals well around movement and considerations of day-to-day life, prioritize self. Like, that's my 10-second elevator pitch. Like, what to do is a fairly intuitive thing, barring any really nuanced health problems. How to do it is actually where people struggle. How to make those choices given access to food, given schedules, given family constraints, given financial constraints, given personal goals. I mean, given the ebbs and flows that are life. And by the way, those things all change seasonally. You get into a good summer rhythm just in chance for the kids to go back to school. You get into a good fall routine just for the winter break to hit. You get into a good exercise routine in the fall with the leaves and hiking just in time for the ice to come. Like, we have variability of reality, which means we have variability of habit. So a lot of times a well-made meal plan will fail you 3 months later because your day-to-day schedule has changed, which means the timing and the meal patterning no longer makes sense. So we are really here to help people with the how. And that is one of my favorite things. And it's also the thing I want to scream from the rooftops is come work with a dietitian to troubleshoot. That is what we do. We work with people a ton. We have lots of ideas about different circumstances, food ideas, movement ideas, lifestyle ideas. We are the ultimate habit nerds. And so when you come sit with us, we're going to hear what you're struggling with, what you're doing, and then we're going to turn the knobs and build a pattern that's meant to help you find a habit, click into it, make it a habit, and then adapt it and let it sway in the nuance that is your day-to-day life. No one habit is going to serve you 365 days a year. And it is really recognizing that. And one of the ways I like to framework that, so my top level would be come work with us so we can help you figure out the how instead of just the what. So we're implementers. And then from there, I invite people to come learn how to live like the healthier them.
And what does that mean?
Yeah. And so one of my favorite things to do is I actually introduce my clients to healthier you, which is to say, this could be a variety of things, right? If I have a client who has diabetes and, really high body fat and it's creating metabolic dysfunction, we'd be talking about the non-diabetic, leaner, lighter him or her, right? If I have a client who has disordered eating and is super restrictive and is dealing with osteopenia and, really bad gastroparesis because they're undernourishing themselves, we're going to talk about the strong and capable version of them that is definitely able to accomplish the things that they feel held back from right now.
So you're talking about the future version of you where you have achieved or are closer to that long-term goal.
The version of you who has figured out those habits.
And so you introduce your client to this person. And what happens?
Then we get to spend the rest of our time figuring out what that version of them does that they currently don't do. And it's one of my favorite frameworks because that is actually the goal, right? If we were going to say it differently, and I'll use a more traditional example. So you get a client who has a weight loss goal. They come in with a weight loss goal. And what's fun is let's use fake numbers. You have a client, it's a female that comes in and they're 40 years old and in the perimenopausal state and they're 180 pounds. And when they were 25, they weighed 130. And so they want to lose 50 pounds. And then we take their body fat. Yep. And they have 33% body fat, which is a little higher than what we'll call the healthy range for a female, which means, yeah, there'd probably be some benefit from a little bit of body fat reduction. But depending on who this person is, let's say that they like to go to the gym, but they're not like an athlete. They're not training for anything crazy. We're saying that 25% body fat is like smack dab in the middle of the range. Mm-hmm. So then we do the math and go, let's have fun and say, okay, well, let's do the leanest this person would get is 20%. Mm-hmm. And then we do the math on that and we go, well, that's boom, boom, boom. You'd weigh 145 at the leanest you'd be.
Not that 130 number.
Not 130. And ideally you'd probably weigh closer to 150 or 155. Mm-hmm. So, and again, that's a number, and I'll say it openly, like if you start training for a marathon, the number's probably going to be lighter. If you start training for a powerlifting meet, the number's probably going to be heavier. And
it's going to change with your goals.
There's a whole lot of things. Yeah. And so let's not obsess over a number, but let's use this initial conversation to say, hey, first things first, 130 pound you was a child and you need to leave her in your past because you are no longer that child. You are now a strong woman that's trying to take care of adult you. Let me introduce you to adult you. She is 30 pounds leaner and lighter in this instance, in this example. But why is she? Mm-hmm. Because if you and I make the mistake of starting this journey as let's lose 30 pounds and we're going to turn a bunch of knobs and manipulate to do whatever it takes to lose 30 pounds, the chances that we lose the plot and end up starving you to satisfy a number on a scale that is basically the measure of your gravitational pull to the center of the earth, we've lost the plot. Mm-hmm. We have. If instead we ask the question, what does she do differently? Who is she? Let's get to know her. And it's like, well, she definitely has more energy than me. She's not so groggy in the morning. She's not so sleepy. It's okay. So you want a nourished, energized, and well-fed, leaner, lighter you. Okay. So we've got to be careful that we don't abandon nourishing you. Mm-hmm. We can't starve you and malnourish you to get to this number because we're not going to get the energy on the other side. She's probably really active. I bet she runs. And it's, so she's physically capable.
And
she
you're
can
learning
do more than you.
You're learning this person is potentially interested in running, or maybe they feel obligated to run because that is the exercise that they've seen around them, but maybe they just want to be active in some capacity. So
exactly. So you can hear where I'm in this made up circumstance that is probably rooted and grounded in real conversations, if I'm being honest. It starts to reveal that human, and you said it perfectly. It'll show us some of the things they'd like to do, which I would much rather talk to a person about how they can become the weekend warrior that chases around their grandkids and likes to travel, and rather than the person that's obsessed with number go down, right? Like we're actually talking about the real human, which is exciting. And you start to realize, yes, the scale can technically be one objective way to infer that journey as a lag time measure, but it really isn't capturing that journey well. And the problem is it's definitely not a correlation coefficient of 1 because there are versions where number go down that human is not who we ended up creating. We could absolutely create the malnourished osteopenic that has brittle bone disease because they starved themselves. Right? We could definitely create the human that developed a really crappy relationship with food, became a hermit, and now no longer eats things with other people around because foods are bad. Like the version scale go down does not capture the thriving human that this person is talking to me about.
That's why I really like this framework, because so often clients will come in and say, I want to weigh this number. And it tells you nothing about that person and what their goals are and their aspirations for the future. And they themselves may not realize that they want more for themselves other than just blanket weight loss in this scenario.
And that's what I try and bridge. And that's because a lot of people, if you just say like, well, we're not going to focus on the scale, you dismiss them and they may not be ready to hear that or understand that. So instead, what I try and do is I try and meet them where they are, which is what does that number mean to you? What is the lifestyle that you've decided that number promises you? Because as you start to tell me that, you're going to tell me who that is. And as we get to know that version of you, we can then already see the habits that person's going to have. It's okay. This person is going to have a fitness routine. So note to self, we're going to be talking about a fitness routine. version of you now versus version of you then, you're going to get more fit, which means we're going to start low and we're going to build up. Eating routine based on who that human is and what they're about. Are they, someone that has the grandkids 3 days a week, and as a result, they're going to need to be able to, grapple with chicken nuggets and, the grandma tax or whatever it is, right? Like and again, some of this is meant to be playful because I want this version of them to be the healthier version of them. Healthier means they're thriving. They're flourishing, which means they're enjoying their social reality. They have a good relationship with food. They have a good relationship with fitness and a good relationship with self-care. And if you white knuckle number go down, you may get to number, but you will have none of those other parts that make being the healthier you actually true.
Absolutely. And so once we've done this framework, the next step is to trial some habits.
Yeah. And now it's so fun. This is literally my favorite part because now we go, what do we do now? And we practice being her. So wait, but we get to find what she likes and doesn't like.
Yeah. Oh, that girl who wanted to run. What if we try to incorporate going on a run outside in a place you enjoy and you feel safe twice a week?
Yeah. Running hurts the knees right now because I've got a little bit of a heavier body. I'm in a bigger body right now. It's like, let's start with some walks on hiking style terrain, which is really good for ankle and hip strengthening, can build a little bit of diversity of movement. Or maybe we start with some mobility and some stretching and some resistance training that may help strengthen the muscles. Or maybe we start with just good old fashioned walking. But it's so cool because once you know who you're trying to become, the game is actually basically troubleshooting becoming that person. And you're going to find the ways that they don't like to exercise and do like to exercise. You're going to find the barriers of what they do like but can't currently do. And you just troubleshoot that. And my most important thing is that means then that the first what that we try, the what being the walks on, the hiking on the trail, or the what being the first food flow we try out, it may or may not work. But it's going to either A, confirm that we're on the right track and we're learning to be the healthier you, or B, it's going to clarify what we're missing and then we're going to adjust course. And that is something that happens over the course of months and months and months. And most people, it's a 1 to 2 year journey of meeting the healthier them, visualizing that person, becoming interested in that person, and then practicing becoming that person while staying in love with who you are and who you're becoming. All of those things. And man, is that coming at it from a lot of different angles. But that's the actual game. People, when they walk into our office, the thing they're actually asking is to be healthier.
In whatever way that means for them.
Whatever that means. And again, there's a lot of ways to try and proclaim that. It's the thing behind the thing, right? And so that is where if you can introduce them to healthier them, do a thought exercise on how to become healthier them. First, you have to help them get to know who that is, and what that person's capable of. And when they get excited about that, now you have a strong why behind the process of becoming. And this concept in psychology, it's called your becoming self. But I love the idea of introducing people to healthier you.
I love that. Wow. I love that concept and that framework because it gets to the root of the person rather than just a number on a scale or whatever that initial goal is. It like you said, it energizes a person to become who they really want to be.
Exactly. And it's going back to this first framework of we help people how. This is what I mean. Yes, I can tell you what to do. So I could sit down with the same person and I could say, okay, that version of you does this, this, and this. Good luck.
No explanation, no trial and error, no, oh, the run hurt. Okay, try something different. We are sitting down with them. We are troubleshooting. We are trying to get them to that goal. We're working together.
How do we get there? And that is the fun part of what we do. And it's also the part that's sorely lacking in care in general. Most medical care is educational and directive. Here's the thing. Have a good day.
Read this handout. Hang it on your fridge. Goodbye.
And most people, they say it themselves. They know this to be true, but it doesn't click. I know what to do. I just don't know how to do it. And frankly, the comment is people don't realize that there is such a thing as a practitioner that doesn't tell you what to do, but actually helps you with the how. And that is dietitians for the most part, particularly dietitians with training in proactive care. And what I will boldly state, because it's the only thing I know to be true, is it is the dietitians at Case Specific. It is literally what we do. It is what we are most proud of. It is the framework at which we meet people, is we are the troubleshooters of the how. And it is so fun.
I love this business you've created.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I would like to take a hard pivot away from this topic because you sent me this really interesting article from Rob Wolf, who wrote this article on the Element blog. And for anyone who isn't familiar, Element, LMNT, is an electrolyte brand. And so I would love for you to dig into what spoke to you about this article, what the overview of the topic was, what drove you to send it to me, and ultimately what you want our viewers to take away from it.
Perfect. We'll call this the ingredient obsession.
Yep.
And this may be my obsession.
This is something you've been like talking about a lot recently.
Yeah, it's another one of those over the years. It's really funny. And I'll give a juxtaposition to start this because this is an industry. It's why our industry, it's the thing that I think probably motivates me to want to do this because there's such obvious confusion. Is right now electrolytes are like the thing that everyone tells each other to drink, right? The Element is it's one of the more popular ones. It's also a really good quality product, but there is the Liquid IV and there's Propel and there's the Gatorades and the Powerades and
Drip Drop,
like over and over. And then you end up with the Ultima Refreshers and the Primes and the coconut waters, which are also in the electrolyte category. And it's so common to just say, oh, you should drink electrolytes. Oh, you should drink electrolytes.
And we just listed 12 products, all
just
electrolyte, vastly different breakdowns, ingredients.
Exactly. But what's so funny to me is the same people that will encourage these products or recommend them casually, whether it's an actual just like friend telling a friend, like, oh, it sounds like you need some electrolytes, or it's a influencer telling a listener, or whether it's like an actual like professional telling a client. There's also a tendency to say, oh, you shouldn't have canned soups because they're high in sodium. Oh, you got to watch out because the sodium in chips.
Oh, yeah. But drink this Element with
a gram of sodium. Yeah. And so I laughed because I had a client the other day where, again, I am largely a pro sodium human, but I will say I'm a pro electrolyte human, and we'll dig into the nuances of all the above. But so I have a client that's been using electrolytes, and they've been feeling a lot better because part of their hydration issue was not just not enough water. It was not enough electrolyte to utilize water, which is something we'll talk about. And then they casually criticized of a meal they ate because it was high in sodium. And I was like, you do realize that the meal you just cited has half the sodium of the electrolytes you're consuming? So like people are, because low sodium eating has become this like, it's a subconscious assumption now. And it's also largely incorrect. And that's what we have to dig into.
And so this article you sent me is titled, "Is sodium good or bad for you?"
Yes. And that is the question. And it's what I'll share is that most people, and I bet a lot of people listening aren't even realizing this, they think electrolytes are healthy, but then they think sodium is not. And sodium is the main electrolyte
in most of the products that we listed 3 minutes ago.
And so we're now in this warped reality where people are trying to eat low sodium foods and then consuming sodium through water. And they don't realize that it's the same ingredient across two vehicles of consumption. And so what we have there is we have the pro sodium and pro electrolyte research, and then we have the largely outdated low sodium research. And this article, which it's on the Element blog, it's written by Rob Wolf, who is better known as the founder of the paleo diet. So for those that are not familiar with that name, and what I'll fractal just for a moment. The paleo diet was created by him in 2008, 2010. He has irritable bowel disease, and he decided that he wanted to see how he could adjust his food to improve his irritable bowel disease in his intestines. And the paleo diet was basically the diet that allowed him to come off his medications and manage his symptoms in a very natural way. The paleo diet looks almost exactly like the FODMAP diet, which is a digestive diet that the dietitians of the world utilize to help people that have digestive issues as well. Paleo got picked up by CrossFit and became this like weight loss, drink the Kool-Aid, and it kind of got morphed into this like kind of neurotic,
we kind of lost the plot a little bit.
Yeah. And so what I'd like to say is that the core paleo concept, and Rob Wolf as a human, he's a phenomenal resource and vantage point in the round table that is wellness and nutrition.
Yep.
His book, Wired to Eat, is one of my favorite books. It's one of the rare books that I'm like, you should collect this perspective because it's really fascinating. All to say, that is to just like almost note, like, dude has some cool experience and background that I would say, hey, is he the end all be all? And do I read what he writes and say, I think that now? No, but is he on the round table of ideas and minds that I think would be worthy of collection? Indeed, that is true. So, all to say, well, good author, great article, and comical to me because so many people are now drinking salt and then avoiding salt in food because they just fundamentally don't understand. So let's zoom out for a second. I'll give me 60 seconds, not 30 seconds. I'll give the 60-second on this blog.
Okay.
Basically what he presents is the background that led to sodium getting a bad rap. And there is a whole lot of 1950s and 1960s short-term data that led to some cool acute observations of, oh, when we reduce sodium, this happens. And the main one was that sodium helps us retain water, which is one of its most important things. And that's a positive thing at baseline because we are 65% water. So no sodium, you're dead. Like, you need salt. You need minimum 500 milligrams a day just to like stay alive. And that's before you sweat, and that's before you lose any, that's before you do anything. So like, sodium is literally one of the most essential minerals in our body, and it makes you retain water. It keeps your water in you. Now, it can also keep excessive water in you. And so one of the observations was if you gave people less sodium, there was an acute drop in their blood pressure because blood is 50+% water. And so when you have less salt, you have less water, which means water go down, which means blood volume go down.
Which means blood pressure go down.
Until you then have the vasoconstriction adaptation where blood vessels then tighten and restrict so that they can move said thicker and lessened blood. And then you have blood pressure go up over a long enough time horizon. So long story made overly short, hopefully, or not overly short, but short for good reason. Acute observations of sodium restriction combined with acute sodium restriction in like critical congestive heart failure cases, which is water in heart muscle in excess, now need water go down. Those two things led to us giving like blanket low sodium recommendations without really thinking about the long-term consequences.
And that's been so widespread that that doesn't apply to a vast majority of people.
We treat it as common knowledge and it is largely useless. What's weird is there is, again, that people always say like, well, there's salt sensitive people. And it's like 5% of those with primary hypertension.
So a subsect of a subsect.
Yeah. So you have to have primary essential hypertension, which means your blood pressure being up is not related to anything else other than your blood pressure's up.
Yep.
And then out of those people, 1 out of 20 are salt sensitive. And so like, that is not the reason to give a sodium recommendation. And what we're talking about right now, my end game, I'll just show my cards, is to help you understand that sodium is more nuanced than eat this much. There are so many reasons that we need it. There are so many things that go in conjunction with it. And so when I sit down with a human, my sodium recommendation isn't going to be based on the USDA guideline or FDA guidelines because those are rooted in 1960s information that's largely not great. We have started to move away from it. Like the last 10 years, we've watched the sodium guidance shift up, but then we've also watched low sodium initiatives. And that's been an attempt in our culture. The average sodium consumption is very high. But there's been our society needs to get sodium down. We aren't anywhere close to our recommendations. And the comment is, if we were, it would probably be 2 down for most people. But one of the things I want to note, because this is one of my main things, your hydration is not just how much water you drink. It is how that water is then delivered throughout the body.
Absolutely.
And that is sodium and potassium. And so it is very, very oversimplified to try and solve basically a water balance by telling the masses to just restrict one of the 3 ingredients, noting that our society currently, yes, they eat more sodium than is thought to be needed, but they also drink significantly less water than is thought to be needed and consume way less potassium than is thought to be needed.
Yes.
And so is the problem too much salt, or is the problem not enough potassium and not enough water? The problem is that if you tell people to just eat less salt, that's super simple. Eat less salt. It's slightly more complicated to say, eat more potassium and drink more water. So instead of telling them to add two things, they tell them to subtract one thing. But subtracting one thing really isn't the actual solution, because the absence of potassium is largely the bigger problem a lot of the time. And the absence of water is the biggest of the problem for most people. And so when you have a society that averages 6,000 milligrams of sodium, and we think most people need 3 to 5 grams, or 3,000 to 5,000. So we're a little above what we think people need for the most part. But that same group who needs 3,500 milligrams of potassium is getting less than 1,000.
Yep.
The bigger problem is the lack of potassium, which is so much easier to add because it's just in fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
Eat more fruits and vegetables.
It's always eat more fruits and vegetables.
It really is. And it's funny because people roll their eyes and it sounds oversimplified until you realize, when you look at the mental map of well-being and you see how many things end up pointing back to eat more produce, it's just over and over and over again. Oh, eat more produce, microbiome. Oh, eat more produce, fiber. Oh, eat more produce, satiety. Oh, eat more produce, electrolytes. I mean, you just over and over, and you just get to the point where you're like, can we please eat more produce?
Please, period.
But let's get back to sodium. Any place you want to direct this before I keep my ranting?
I know that you also wanted to tie in insulin resistance into this conversation, because insulin resistance is also such a hot topic and does in fact play into the sodium conversation.
Correct. And that is where I wanted to go next. And I don't want to get too into the weeds on this, so hold me to that.
Okay.
But one of the core concepts that's worth noting is that sodium plays an important role in these systems and processes that manage our insulin sensitivity. And so sodium go down, insulin resistance go up. And the reason that's valuable is because when you look at the data that shows chronic disease running rampant, right? Diabetes is running rampant. Insulin resistance is running rampant. That is more correlated to absence of salt than it is presence of salt. And so a lot of times when people end up going too low on sodium, or they're over restricting because they have heart disease or whatever it is, they end up developing insulin resistance and becoming more likely to become diabetic. It also means that a lot of times people, when they eat too little salt, end up with more sugar cravings. And what's wild is salt will actually reduce sugar cravings in people.
Say more.
Yeah. So like a lot of the time, and this is a wild thing, and this is a harmless test to do at home. The next time you have a sweet craving, drink an electrolyte beverage.
And just watch and see what happens.
Yeah. Chances are the sweet craving goes away. Now, it doesn't mean you are suddenly going to be like, I hate cookies now. Like, that's not what I mean. But like the actual, like, it's not I'm in the mood for a cookie, because that's not a sweet craving. That's like an experience of a specific food. But if it's, I need something sweet, that may be actually an insulin scenario where if you had some sodium in that moment, your insulin would blunt and you would actually stabilize. And so it's worth noting that a lot of the things that sodium got blamed for is largely our like high sugar, high added sugar, low activity insulin resistance reality. And again, he does a really good job of digging into that. But it's all to note is that, one, right now our sodium recommendations seem low. Two, our current sodium consumption may be a little high, but the more dominant problem is inadequate potassium, inadequate water. So drink more water, eat more fruits and vegetables instead of reduce your salt. And again, if you're drinking enough water and consuming enough potassium, sodium goes away, which is why in Japan, where they consume roughly double our sodium, do not have anywhere close to the same incidence of blood pressure issues. It's considered data-wise, it's almost completely unrelated. But then when you're here, it's correlated, and we go, why is it correlated? And it's not the sodium, it's the foods that the sodium just so happens to be in. So the sodium is getting the blame for an ultra-processed food environment, that UPF, right? Ultra-processed food environment that is largely spiking sugar, affecting insulin, and then not being opposed properly with the right hydration and the right potassium and the right sources of potassium, aka fruits and vegetables, aka fiber, aka the thing that slows digestion down and would render the UPFs useless. So we're basically looking at a broken machine and we're diagnosing the wrong part of it. Yep. That doesn't mean I think everyone should go out and start pounding a gram of sodium, because Element is definitely a higher sodium one as an example. And it's more for people that get sweaty is the thing I'd say out loud, or people that are really behind. But it is to note that, most people would benefit from a sodium intake and potassium intake in conjunction. That is really, really solid.
Sodium is nuanced.
Yes. And working with a dietitian is going to help you sit down and go, what are your likely sodium needs given who you are, what you do, how much you sweat, all the stuff. Yep. And then also let's take a peek at, in conjunction with your sodium, what's your water and what's your potassium, because those two things may matter more for you. And most of the time, keep calm, salt on actually becomes the takeaway message.
Keep calm, salt on.
Yeah. Okay. Which is, that's the motto I live by, and my blood pressure is.
We are moving into our last topic of today's episode, and it is one that is very important, very prevalent in the media right now as we're filming this, November 7th. And it is that we are currently in the midst of a gap in SNAP benefits.
Yeah.
Due to, in part, the government shutdown and a lot of factors. And so we wanted today to talk about what SNAP is, who is being affected by this, what we are doing as a company to try to help this, and just dive in a little bit more because it's a really hot topic and something that absolutely touches our work in our field.
Yeah. And something like you said, we're in the trenches of right now. Mm-hmm. And we're going to tie this in and basically call this our MAHA, like what's going on with the Make America Healthy Again, because this is a part of making America healthy again. And one of the things I want to tie back, and then I want to really dig into this, is in previous episodes when we've talked about MAHA, one of my main criticisms has been awaiting the bridge of the gap, which is to say a lot of the core concepts they're touting, I don't actually disagree with, right? Like, so when we think about the idea of basically prioritizing access to better food, there is definitely an element of that means there is a reduction in consumption of less ideal food. My comment is that reduction in consumption shouldn't necessarily come from policy that prohibits it, but should more likely come from access to the other stuff that dilutes it. And that's that concept of subtraction by addition. If you want the lowest income population to consume less candy bars, first make sure they have access to the other things. And so far the policies have largely been punishing the stuff that's not good and have been really lacking on filling the gap. And there's been commentary about, we're working with these produce groups and we're working with these different things, but there has yet to be like a good
We're waiting for the
stance.
action. We're hearing a lot of words, and we've said this on many episodes. What we're hearing isn't the problem. It's the lack of action. And so we're just going to keep talking about it and hope that it happens.
Correct. Because where I'm at with it is when you think about, and I promised this at the beginning of this season when I said I'm going to talk about MAHA, but I'm also going to try and zoom out and be as apolitical as possible. Yes. I'm not going to be tribal and like banging quote unquote my side's flag. And it's largely because to say that I'm on a side is to mischaracterize and completely misunderstand me as a human, but that's an aside for another day. The concept of SNAP, I understand why it's controversial. Because there is the financial and the mind, basically the financial and the hyperlogical versus like the human and the emotional. And the comment I'll make is that a human is unique in its ability to do both. And so the answer probably has to lie somewhere in the middle of our most logical thoughts and our most emotional thoughts.
So tell me more about what you're saying with the commentary on all sides about how this impacts our budget versus how this impacts our people.
Yes, that's
tell me
perfectly
more.
Said. So right now, all of this is being funded by money we don't have, right? We are currently deficit spending.
Yes,
and
the United States government.
Yeah, as a whole, we are deficit spending, which means we are printing money. Printing money causes inflation. Yes. Inflation makes all of us poorer. And 5 years ago, we had 29% less inflation than we currently do. So the reason why everyone's budgets are so bootstrapped and everyone's feeling so tight is because we printed such obscene amounts of money during COVID to try and save our lives. And we are now feeling that in real time. The comment is to continue to print money is to continue to make that worse and worse and worse.
And so how does this tie to SNAP?
Yes. this is where this becomes the political piece, where you have, again, a side that is largely, and this is where it gets very nuanced, and I don't want to fractal us, so I want to make sure we get into SNAP dominantly, but as a way in, what I would pose is I understand the current need to have tough conversations about what the government is spending its money on. I'll leave that there. Yeah. That is we all need to look at it and say, right now we are spending too much. We are plummeting our entire country towards a very, very dark thing that frankly, all of us are too spoiled to fully understand. And that means that there's going to be some tough cuts and some tough trims. That does not mean that we need to take a sledgehammer to it and just bust everything and then deal with whatever downstream consequences happen. And so, yes, and my comment here would be, even if you are somebody that believes that SNAP has too much funding, right? So there is one side of this political divide right now, that it has too much funding and it needs to be reduced as a part of an overarching deleveraging, right? It's called a beautiful deleveraging. We have, we reduce some of our handouts, we increase some of our taxes, we balance our budget, we do all the complicated things we need to do to balance a budget. If you're someone that believes that, what I would say is that that doesn't mean SNAP should be turned off like a light switch. Mm-hmm. We would need to land this plane. And then obviously there's the other side, which is to say that no, SNAP is actually too small and it needs to be more funded. And my comment to that side would be, well, we still need to be discussing about feeding well and funding well. And so I really personally, what I'll say is I don't really care where you are on the spectrum of policy and, well, also monetary and fiscal policy. That's not what this is about right now. The bigger problem is that SNAP, while it is a controversial thing of, hey, it's one of our bigger expenses and we need to be talking about this, I'm not even going to disagree that we need to talk about it. But what I'm going to say is that while you're talking about it, you can't just turn it off.
Yes. And so where we're at now is that the U.S. government funds SNAP. SNAP provides food to millions and millions of people.
42 million people.
Yes. And so with the government shutdown, there's conversation that no SNAP benefits were going to be handed out starting on November 1st. There has been political discourse, a few judge rulings gone back and forth on demanding that these SNAP benefits be paid out. And essentially where we're at now is that some benefits have been handed out, but not the full amount that is usually provided to everyone who receives SNAP on November 1st. The discussion comes in with the monetary piece where some people believe that our government budget should not be paying for SNAP or should be a reduction in SNAP due to the fact that we're in a deficit. Like you just said, that affects millions and millions of people. And so if we go from feeding people with SNAP to $0 in SNAP spending, you are affecting 42 million people. And that is a huge gap and not something that I believe we should, again, turn off like a light switch.
Yeah, you can't. And that's really what it comes down to. And what's wild is right now, the argument that, oh, well, like we can't be funding this because we need to balance our budget would have made sense if the big beautiful bill hadn't given $5 trillion in deficit spending as a permission, which means they're not even trying to balance the budget. So right now we have a whole bunch of politicians that are just like playing politics and playing chicken. And while they're doing that, they're playing with people's lives. And so to your point, SNAP basically had no funding. And then the court said, hey, you have to fund it. And right now the administration is actually saying like, no, we don't, we're not going to. Mm-hmm. There has been some allocating of funding across some states, but largely we have, no matter what, while the government is shut down, there is at this very moment a delay in funding.
Yep.
And then there is definitely a reduction in funding, even if they do it, and there may not be any funding.
Yes.
And so you're either going to give everybody half or you're going to give half of people their full amount. So it's say delays and reductions.
Mm-hmm. And so what we really want to talk about is what is SNAP, who uses it, how we go through the process to even obtain SNAP, and then what are we doing as a company in this interim time where things are so uncertain for so many people.
Beautifully said. And my comment would be, it's time for us to look at our community and actually like think about people in this conversation, right? And so we can, and again, that's where I as objectively as I can step back and I can steel man the arguments on quote unquote both sides. I can understand why discussions need to be had, but also while you're having those discussions, I would argue that it is your duty to make sure that you're not breaking things and creating absolute chaos. And so yes, right now we are in a reality where 42 million people use and rely on SNAP. About 70% of those people are children, which is about 40%. There's 14 million kids in the United States on SNAP. And the remaining 30% is a blend of our elderly and our injured or impaired. And so we have roughly 70% of those people, which is, we'll round it to 30 million of those people, are our most vulnerable population and genuinely need that support. Yep. It is worth noting that there are work requirements. There are a lot of policies and things that allow this to be an accent and an addition to.
When you apply for SNAP, there is an income threshold where, depending on how much you make and how many people are in your household, determines your eligibility for SNAP. So
there already are policies in motion. And again, do those need changed? Conversation for another day. It's to say that this thing is built out a little better than expected, and to turn it off is to literally just cut people's budgets overnight. The other piece that's really important is that it is used largely to fund food banks and places that do give really good access to quality food. The EBT card, which allows the debit side of things, can be used at grocery stores. But what's really misunderstood, and this I'll say this, I didn't understand this fully until I actually did a deep dive into this, is yes, SNAP money can be used towards what we'll call some of the less healthy foods. But what's interesting is that when you look at the data, because one of the things that gets thrown around a lot, and I want to dig into this. Right now, our lowest income population is 2.5 times more obese than our highest income population. So we could look at that data and go, what do we make of this? And we go, well, one, that would tell us that we no longer have a calorie problem, right? So the origination of SNAP was in the 1960s, and it was meant to basically help stop starvation. Yes. And awesome. Glad we did it. Fast forward, we don't really have starvation anymore. We now have various types of malnutrition. And that goes back to the comment, which is to say we did a good job of making sure everyone has enough calories, but now they don't have enough quality. So what I would like to see is I'd like to see SNAP evolve from going from making sure everyone's fed to making sure everyone's fed well, which to me is, we should see increases in fruits and vegetables and proteins and all of that. What's really fascinating is that data like A1Cs and obesity are actually really, really mapped, which is to say that in areas where there are grocery stores and there are food banks, the obesity 2.5 is not actually there. And more importantly, the A1Cs and the diabetes incidents are lower. And so there is a lot of great data that actually shows when those people have access to those foods, they do consume those foods and they do benefit from those foods.
It's almost like it's an access to food conversation.
Boom.
And what we said at the top of this segment was what we want to see from this administration is action to make healthier choices more accessible to a wider group of people.
Exactly.
And so maybe if that we have that common talking point that fruits and vegetables are so expensive these days, and maybe lower income individuals would eat more fruits and vegetables, we could make them more accessible. And that is in part what SNAP does.
Yep. And there's even in segments, because states are allowed to do various incentives for SNAP, there are actually subsets of SNAP that do vegetables do a doubling, which is to say you get double the dollars if you do fruits and vegetables. And once again, that does. So it's really interesting to see that the data that shows, because in my mind, there was definitely some biases towards our people. It wasn't a bias as much as it was a question rooted in bias, which is there's a logic to it. When people are given this money and then they're given all the options, what are they picking? And if the answer is they're picking the protein and the fruits and vegetables and the things to make meals, awesome. What ends up happening is you start to see the reputation that has been peddled out there that SNAP is being used to buy candy bars is limited largely to the areas where people are buying their groceries from gas stations.
Yes.
And those areas are the ones that have obscene levels of obesity and obscene levels of diabetes and metabolic symptomology that is skewing the data so intensely. And so we're looking at it and going, oh my gosh, in this parsed data, we can actually see the pockets where when SNAP is being paired with a food access economy appropriately, it has profound benefits, and it leads to things like the children on it more likely to go to college. They're adult wages go up significantly. Their time and attentiveness in school goes up. All sorts of metrics shift. And so we start to see where, okay, in this MAHA movement of making America healthy again, we need to be really delving into this data in depth and looking at where are these pockets, and recognize that one of the bigger problems is actually still in access. So they have an EBT debit card that could buy fruits and vegetables, but if the fruits and vegetables are a 3-hour bus ride away, they're not getting those vegetables. So they're eating the things at the gas station. And that is a very, very different problem that requires a very, very different solution. And so it's really interesting to look at SNAP and recognize what it does, what it's capable of, what it can accomplish. Are there things we should be doing to tweak it, adjust it, optimize it, spend better within it? Yes, probably. But the other thing that's phenomenal is 90% of the money in SNAP goes to food.
Yes.
And a lot of people think it's this administrative, like, it's like, oh, only 30% gets to the, no, it's 90% of it gets to the people to buy the food. People can't buy cigarettes. They can't buy tobacco. Like, they can't buy tobacco. They can't buy alcohol. It limits it to fair and reasonable things. And the exceptions to some of the foods that are largely criticized for why they're on SNAP, they're made exception because they're in areas where there aren't alternatives. And so our comment would be, well, what can we do to make it so that there are alternatives so that we could actually get a tipping point here? In the meantime, though, this larger debate of what should we do with SNAP is rendered kind of like, have this conversation another day, because right now our problem is that it just got switched off. And switched off while you replace it is unacceptable, but switch off while you bicker and have
unproductive conversations
is completely unacceptable. And so where we're at now is, like you said, we're currently in a record government shutdown.
Yes, we are.
And while the sides bicker and squabble and do the things they do without furloughing their salaries, and, none of them are worried or have to sweat, but that's another conversation. I'll just leave that there as a slightly annoyed comment or side comment. SNAP is being delayed, and it's being impaired, and it may also just not be distributed at all, which means right now, as we speak, it is November, basically early mid-November, and checks were supposed to go out a week ago. They still have not. And there are some exceptions where they're able to, but it's largely none have, which means those families that were relying on that are having their first week with tight budget. Week 2 means no groceries. And so we are watching a reality where over the next 2 to 3 weeks, millions of children will be skipping dinner. Millions of families will be skipping dinner. Millions of children will go into their weekend. They may be doing free reduced lunch and breakfast at school, but they are not going to have food for the weekends. And right now, we've worked closely with the Greater Pittsburgh Area Food Bank for years. We do cooking demos with them. We do all sorts of educations.
I did my master's there. Like, that was one of my rotations.
Yeah, it's wonderful. They're such a great organization. And when we reached out a couple weeks ago to say, how can we help? They were like, all hands on deck. We don't have the people. We don't have the resources. We don't have the food. We don't have the funds. Like, we are getting an amount of demand that we can't handle at all.
Which is a heartbreaking reality for not just Pittsburgh. That's what we're experiencing here in Pittsburgh.
It's just a small sampling.
This is happening all over the country.
Yes. And so we obviously at Case, we made a strong donation as a company to the food bank directly. We've been running a campaign on our socials to encourage people to join us with that. And we've been very impressed by how many people have stepped up, whether through the campaign on Insta and actually donating through our posts, or the people that have messaged me and said, thanks for bringing light to this. I just made a donation directly. Because again, we don't need the sticker. That's not the point.
I want to commend you on leading this effort, because I know that it is so easy for people to do things performatively, but these are relationships we have with these community members with the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank, and we want to be there for our community. We are sharing with you that our company has donated, not to tout it around and say, look at us, we're doing some performative activism, but because we really care and we want you to join us. So we are running a campaign over on our Instagram where we are doing a fundraiser that goes directly to the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank. In the links of this video podcast episode, wherever you're listening, there will also be a link to donate to the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank. But if you are not in Pittsburgh and you want to donate to your local food bank, we urge you to look it up. I am assuming so many places that you could be listening from are accepting donations at your local food bank.
Yeah.
If money is tight right now, which we completely understand, and you cannot donate, please share this message with others. Donate your time and go volunteer at the food banks. any way that you can help, even if it's just sharing a post, is getting this message to other people. And we are just trying to make the greatest community impact for our community here in Pittsburgh, but also across the entire country while we figure out what is going to happen with
while we're up in the air and in limbo. And the thing I'll say is this, to me, it just transcends politics.
Yeah.
Right. This is human, but also what's really interesting is in the argument from a conservative side that this is something that should be funded by the private sector. Well, here we are. So like if you're on that side and you have that belief, that's a reason to step up and join us. So in my mind, regardless of where you land politically, stepping up and helping build a gap and, bridge a gap is the way to say that. It just fundamentally makes sense. I can't fathom living in a world where we just decide that 14 million kids should skip some meals.
Yeah, I've seen so many amazing communities come together, and I've seen so many amazing social media posts of things people are doing for their communities, and I want to extend my gratitude and thanks on behalf of the community. I also want to empathize with the people who feel like our government is failing us right now and that these people should have access to food while we figure this out. And I understand this is part of a bigger discussion, but also I want to empathize with those who have not gotten a check yet this month and who have been waiting on it, or those who are calling on our government to do something. And
we see you.
Yeah, we see
hear
you.
We feel for you.
Thank you for sharing the posts. Thank you for doing what you have for your community. If you've donated to a pantry, donated monetarily, started your own pantry, wonderful.
Yeah. There are some great orgs. Like I said, the food bank that's one of the largest. They have a great distribution channel. They get access to lots of fruits and vegetables and lean meats and proteins and all sorts of good stuff like that. But there are, 412 Food Rescue in Pittsburgh area. They have all sorts of sites. There are a bunch of restaurants that have signed up and signed on to distribute as they can. One of the things I found interesting too is there are some like backpack groups where you can donate and they actually send kids home with backpacks with food for the weekend. So that, again, attempts to fill dinners and fill refrigerators and fill weekend gaps. These are ways that we can help those that are currently being affected, not by the evolution of policy, but the complete failure of government. And that's, to me, where, again, this is such a complex topic. And in my mind, there's a lot to discuss, and we have a very diverse audience, which is to say, I don't want people to feel ostracized by their political beliefs, but I definitely want to make sure that we recognize that it's like we have the short-term conversation of this, which is like, one, right now our children are going hungry for reasons that are completely out of everybody's hands. And like, I think that there's a community opportunity to step up, stand up, and show up. And then also, by the way, when we get back to having this conversation, if we're going to adjust SNAP, it needs to be done in a way that doesn't repeat the same problem. I can't fathom that so we're going to go ahead and just completely axe this. And no, we haven't built anything that's going to be helping these families like bridge this gap. We're just going to like throw them to the wolves and hope they figure it out. That seems inhuman in a way that I just can't fathom. And so I understand debate. I understand change. I understand political differences. I understand all the complexities, but also I understand 14 million children deserve better.
Yes,
and so let's figure that out. We're supposed to be super smart as a nation. And right now I'm seeing some stuff that feels pretty stupid. So I'll get off my political high horse on that front, but it is to say that, yes, if you can join us, if you're a listener in the Pittsburgh area, please consider, donating to the food bank or the 412 Food Rescue. If you are not in the Pittsburgh area, your local food bank is going to be a great opportunity. It is, when we're talking about bridging gaps and giving good access and also delivering a distribution channel. Cause we originally were like, do we like make a bunch of food? Like what? And we just realized we weren't going to be able to like get it to the people in a way that was meaningful. And it was like, oh, there are groups that literally that's what their job is. And right now they need volunteers and they need dollars.
Okay. Well,
appreciate you.
I appreciate you.
Is that all we got for the day?
I think so. Follow us on social media. Follow us on Instagram at Case Specific Nutrition. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I guess we'll see you next month.
As always, everybody, thank you and be well.